Hi, good morning. So, healers, I want to talk a little bit about something again about abuse because I seem to be on that right now. I know it sounds like a lot of the same thing because abuse is abuse, but it's different for everybody and it's hidden. So, there's so many different aspects to abuse. That's why we hear so much about it and nobody knows exactly what to call abuse at times because abuse is obviously a pattern, number one. So an incident is different from abuse. So if something happens to somebody and it happens one time, you wouldn't technically say you were abused because abuse is a pattern. And so these patterns get so ingrained in us that we sometimes don't know they're abuse. So that's why I continue to bring them up because there's so many different segments to the abuse. Imagine abuse as like the seed, okay? And it's in the middle, it's in the heart. And so it just all around it is the rest of the fruit or whatever, and it can just be in different aspects. Or think of it as a branch or the trunk in a tree. Think of abuse as the trunk, and all of the branches, they go in different directions. So you might even not realize that you're being abused and for a long time because you're not sure why you're sick, but this is what it is. You can't heal until you figure out why you're sick. You can't heal until you get to the root. And you can't get to the root of why somebody abuses you, but you can realize that you have been abused and get to the root of why you didn't know you were abused. So that's what we're working on. So this is like another aspect of abuse. So this is be more something in religious circles more so. And it's in society actually, and I'm going to say it's more prevalent for women because in all cultures, women are the weaker vessel, right? And the Bible says that, obviously, strength wise, women, physical strength wise, women are weaker. And so we're coming to realize that maybe women are actually more um, stronger in other ways, right? Like responsibility and things like that, maybe more now so than in the past, but there are ways that women are stronger, but men are stronger physically. And so men were always looked at to take care of women in a physical manner, right? Or to take care of them overall because women were considered really weak, especially back in, the beginning of some of these civilizations, right? So in the church setting, it goes back to, let's just say, oh, I don't know, Mesopotamia, let's just say. And so people were in a time where they were in tribes and things. And so the men were always the leaders, right? The women weren't leaders in any of these tribes. And I think what ended up happening with that too is, cultures change over time and things. But there were times when women did lead back then. You don't hear a lot about it. I think a lot of that stuff was behind the scenes. But there were times when there was a tribe leader who was a man and his daughter or wife took over, if something happened to him. So there were times when women led. They weren't so gender specific as we are today, though they looked at women as being the weaker vessel, right? So submission or abuse. Form of authority, submission, right? Or a force of authority. That's what abuse is. That's the contrast, okay? We got submission or abuse, and we have submission as a form of authority contrasted against abuse of a force of authority, right? So when we form an authority or we form a society, we need guidelines and rules. And today I want to speak on that. There is a need to submit to many things. When you follow rules, you are submitting to a rule. Following directions is a form of submitting. When you follow instructions, you are submitting to the instruction. We are required to submit to the laws of the land, and this is required to be a citizen, right? You have to be a citizen. You have to make sure you know the laws of the land before you can even be citizenized if you're not born in right in the country. What about submission in relationships? All of our relationships require submission. Usually, successful relationships require both of the individuals to submit to each other. Okay? You're submitting one to another. You're accommodating each other's needs. You're influencing each other in a positive way. That's being submitting. I'm submitting to the need, to the knowledge that you need me to support you. You're submitting to the knowledge that I need your support. So you're submitting vice versa, right? The thing to know is in a caring situation, no one realizes they are submitting. So like you have a friend and you're spending time and, hey, what do you want to have? Do you want to have ice cream? You want to have yogurt? And then like your friend's like, oh, I'd rather have yogurt. Okay, let's go. Let's go have yogurt. And you're just enjoying yourself. You're happy to accommodate each other. That's what a healthy relationship looks like. For example, if you go to your friend's house and they ask you to come over at 6 o'clock. You don't show up at like 5. You don't show up at 8. You submit to their request to show up at 6, right? And when you get there, you always take your shoes off because they requested that. They tell you where to park your car, where to take a seat, and you know, and it's all kind, and you are happy to submit. You're like, don't even question their authority. You're like, this is their place, and I want to enjoy some time with them and this is their order, how they keep things, how they run things. So this is how we're going to do it. Submission means to put yourself under someone. You submit to them willingly, like my examples. This doesn't mean this doesn't mean that you put yourself below them. This means you are submitting to their instruction, to the rules of their home. We aren't challenging the authority of the house. It's a rule of theirs. It would be disrespectful to enter someone else's home and not follow their guidelines. I mean, you wouldn't even think about going over to someone's house and saying, oh, you want me to sit on this chair or, like eat in your kitchen? Well, no, I'm going to sit on the floor over here and eat in your living room. Like you're not going to do that, right? The rules, it's like when it comes to submission, it's it's you giving your submission, like you're submitting to them. They're not even requiring it. They're telling you how things are, but they're not requiring it. Maybe they would let you sit on the floor and eat. Maybe that's something that would fly with them, but you're submitting to what their request is. You're willfully doing it. You know the rules of their house create order, and it's the same thing in universities, at work. Your boss requires you to submit to the duties of your job description. You don't say, I'm going to do the job this way today because you have to do it the way he says, even if it takes you longer. Sometimes your boss will ask you to do something and you know a shorter way to do it, but they're like, well, I need you to do it this way. A lot of times that's just a power thing. I hate to say it because if you have an employee who knows how to do a job and can get it done and feels more confident in getting it done the way that they perform it, then it would be in your best interest to let the employee carry that task out the way that they feel like it needs to be carried out instead of forcing your way to do something on them, which will require them to work harder and longer and slow everything down, making them feel less confident. So, I mean, a lot of times they have rules but they're willing to work with you, right? And say, "Hey, can I do this project this way instead? Because this is how I'm used to doing it, and this is what works for me." You might have a boss that says, "Go ahead and do it," but it's to your employer's best interest to make sure they accommodate their employees that way. Okay. So now the chief executive officer of a corporation has the entire company submitting to his lead. They're submitting to his lead, right? The laws of the company, right? In contrast, submission can be abused. When someone submits to a relationship as a child or as a spouse, they are submitting to allow the other to lead. The Bible says, wives submit to your husband as the head, the leader. The gift of submission allows the leader to lead, knowing they have followers they are responsible for. This gives the submitter freedom to choose to follow or not. So if the gift of if submission is a gift that you're granting, then that means you have the freedom to choose to follow or not. Submission is not following blindly, it's willingly being led. This sounds like a good partnership and it should work. Someone leading and the other following, everything is working in an orderly fashion. The leader has a job to do and they get a sense of being in charge. They know they have followers, and this is when they can take the best interest of the followers or get off course and do what's best for themselves, forgetting the followers and their duty to lead. When they're forgetting the followers' needs, the followers wonder why they are following someone who doesn't care about their needs. Then they will be reminded that their duty is to submit. And so they're under the impression that submitting also means just shut up and submit. Okay, so people who are wrongfully in charge and requiring you to submit, they're under the impression that you need to just be quiet and let them lead because God gave them this position over you. And it becomes this twisted idea in their head. And like just with any other position of power, it grows. Like power has a real strong tendency to grow. It doesn't shrink. Power grows, okay? So when somebody has any little bit of power, they can start to grow. Like their idea of their position is bigger in their mind than it actually is. And their responsibilities are smaller and their position is bigger. And that's what happens with the growth of power. You start to be less responsible for your character, less responsible for your actions, and more into the fact that you are in a power position. So now here you are, right? You have poor leadership with lack of skills because the power is going to their head. Maybe they were a good leader. Good leaders can lose their head a little bit. They need to step back and take a look, right? But now they have a lack of skills. They don't know how to deal with their subordinates, basically. If you're going to be a leader, you have subordinates. How do you take care of your subordinates? You need to know what their needs are. Even if you have a business and you're a business owner, your customers are your leaders. You're actually in submission to your customers when you're a business owner. You have to make sure that you know the needs of your customer. If you come from a religious background and you speak to a church leader to ask them what to do when your husband has anger issues and doesn't want to address the family dysfunction, they will tell you to submit. And by submitting, God will work through your husband by his submission to God. Now, that's how that goes. And I can verify it because it's happened to me at least 7 times. You will be advised in some religious situations to submit to an unethical leader. As you submit, things increasingly get worse, and every time you ask for help, you get the same answer. If you leave the church or marriage, eventually for sanity, you will be told you are unruly and refuse to submit. I'm going to end on that note because it's a pretty strong, powerful thing. You have the right to make decisions in your life that are best for you first. You get to just, and that includes deciding who you're going to submit to or not submit to. That is your right. God has given you that right. There isn't anywhere in the Bible where God is forcing anyone to submit. He's telling wives to submit to their husband. But with that, he's telling the husbands to love themselves as Christ loved the church. I'm sorry, love their wives as Christ loved the church. Just remember, it doesn't matter how hard you try to get somebody else to understand how you feel about something. they sometimes do not understand. And that doesn't mean that there's technically anything wrong with them. It means that they don't understand. So in that situation, you have to consider, do you want to submit to somebody who doesn't understand where you're coming from? You're not on the same path and you don't know where they're leading you? Now, that doesn't make very much sense. And that's not a very wise decision. So be careful who you submit to and be careful what you submit to and make sure you know exactly what you're submitting to. Thank you. Have a great day.